And welcome again our Zoom community. I'm your host for today. The only thing I want to mention on this side is please put your questions in the chat on Zoom or on poll everywhere. You can see that now on the slide. That's the way how we can interact with the moderator and with us. And so I can forward now my word to our moderator, who is already ready. I hope so. Then I will go to my Aaron. Yeah, okay, perfect. So the stage is yours.
Wonderful. Okay, can we put in just a moment? We'll put the slide up showing the panelists that I'll be talking with. Welcome everybody. We have a group of exceptionally accomplished leaders who I have the privilege of interviewing, and in fact, I'll be asking a lot of the questions you'll be sending me as we get into the more interactive portion of it. And it will build off of some of the themes we've already talked about, control to creativity, the theme that emerged yesterday and Gemma hit on this morning about this shift from an industrial age, mechanistic form of management to a new paradigm for leadership that's much more fit for today's dynamic, connected world. Organizations and leaders, by and large, have operated for a long time still under the industrial era of predictability, control, bureaucracy, and it's time to reimagine leaders and leadership. We've seen for years that many organizations are overmanaged and underled, and we need to reinvigorate and reimagine leadership. And that's what we're going to be talking about today with our panelists. This harkens back to what Gary talked about as well when he spoke about humanocracy and the need for leaders and organizations to be more human and more human-centered. And we'll get into all of that. I think there's even a more urgent imperative now as the COVID pandemic has accelerated many of the trends that were already underway toward these shifts in leaders and leadership and what we expect and need from them in today's complex and uncertain world. And so I'll have the privilege of introducing you to and spending time with Stephen, Alain, Tiffani, and Amy. They're all amazing leaders and thinkers in their own right, and wonderful humans as well. And I think you'll enjoy spending time with them. Rather than give a long introduction, if I introduce them based on their successes and their resumes, we would spend all the time of me telling you how great these people are. And I'd rather let you experience it for yourselves. So I'm going to introduce each of them by asking each of them a question and giving them a few minutes just to explore that question. I've tailored the question in particular to each of them, knowing them and some of their passions and brilliance. To hopefully give you a little glimpse into it. And I would like to start with Tiffani. So Tiffani, welcome. I'm going to introduce you first. And I'm going to start the introduction by sharing some research we've been doing that shows that winning companies are increasingly responsible for and taking more and more of the economic value that's created. And if you look back on this chart to 2004 to 2007, what you see is the average total economic value created was not that different from what the top companies were doing. But over time, more and more of the top quintile performers are creating and capturing much more of the value. And the average companies, the middle performers, are increasingly getting to a point where they're not creating much value at all. And in fact, the losers are destroying value. And I bring this up because, in particular, because Tiffani, who's the Chief Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce.com and the author of the book Growth IQ, has talked about this trend of what the winners do and what the leaders in these winning companies do differently. And she talks a lot about how it's not only starting outside with customers and getting the customer experience right, but pairing that with employee experience and how leaders need to do this in the new world we live in. And so I wanted to start the question to Tiffani with that question. Tiffani, how do leaders create that special employee experience and customer experience to be a critical differentiator for the winners?
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Here's what I'd say. Two things that I thought of immediately when I saw that graph was I feel like the definition of value changed around that time. It was very much a capitalistic value, and then it sort of moved to this more business being the greatest platform for change, as our CEO, Mark Benioff, often says. And I think that that's part of it. The other side of it as well is really thinking more broadly about the shareholder community being more than just those that invest in the company. So shareholders are your employees, your communities, and your vendors, your providers, et cetera. And so I think when leaders have kind of this beginner's mind and approach things a little bit differently, they get an opportunity to see where value can really lend itself. So I just finished doing some research actually last week, Erin, that you were sort of alluding to, that companies that have very strong employee experience leads to very good and compelling and differentiated customer experience, which then actually resulted in a significantly higher growth rate than those companies that don't have a strong employee experience. But what was interesting about that is it didn't go in the other direction. So if you had a strong customer experience, it did not mean you had a strong employee experience. So it really needed to start with employee first and customer centricity to think about that value equation differently.
Thank you, Tiffani.
What would you say, Tiffani, are the implications for leaders who are managing and leading complex times, having to strategically pivot, dealing with economic issues, changes in consumer behavior? They're dealing with all this, and they're still having to also focus on an employee experience at a time when that's quite difficult. What advice would you have?
Yeah, I would say this is where leaders really have to shine. I think the way leaders and brands support their employees and their customers at this point will have far-reaching implications to what their customers will think of their companies in 2021 and beyond. But I would say this, taking the time to make sure that you are reaching out both to your employees and your customers is really critical. We did an exercise where our CEO challenged us to have 1 million conversations. And this was about the first week of May with our customers. And it was not about selling. It was not about, how do we move a deal along? It was about how are you? What is it that we might be able to do to support you, and really leaning into understanding the jobs to be done, not only today, but in the future. And during those 1 million conversations, literally with 55,000 employees, we actually ended up doing about 1.5 million conversations. We've launched 5 new products because of it. We actually reorganized our product pipeline. We reorganized the company in some ways. Fortunately, we had to let go of 1,000 employees, but then we opened recs for 4,000 new employees because we completely reimagined what the company was going to have to deliver going forward. So from a leadership perspective, that's a window into understanding what the employees wanted, but more importantly, what the customers wanted, and being able to make really hard decisions. For leaders right now, it's either go back to the status quo and look back and try to recreate where we came from, or look forward and listen to customers and employees to figure out what they want from us in the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tiffani. I'm going to now turn to introduce Alain. Alain, you're the CEO of a group that has several different businesses in the Middle East. And I remember a few months ago, we were talking, and you mentioned to me that if one of your employees in a movie theater just wanted a job, just wanted to come to work, get a paycheck, take people's movie tickets, and just get paid in exchange for that, that you weren't sure that employee is really what you valued as part of the team. You mentioned to me that what you wanted was somebody who comes in with a sense of purpose, who would get excited about creating a great experience for customers. And that's what you thought they were looking for, and that's what you were looking for. And you talked about some of the transformation, and we'll get into that. It was interesting to me when I asked, how did you launch this transformation? You started with leaders. You said it all starts with the critical shifts that leaders need to make. Can you talk a little bit about that, Alain?
Sure. Thank you, Aaron, and hi, everyone. Effectively, I am a strong believer that it's all about leadership. I mean, whatever you do, it's all about people. It's all about leadership. All the rest is detail in comparison to the huge impact that people drive. And leadership is something that at Majid Futtaim, we look at it not just, as a group of senior people. It's about everyone in our 44,000 people. Everyone is a leader. Now, some people look at it in terms of seniority or importance of the roles, but in reality, we have a lot of senior people who actually don't lead. This starts by a mindset, and the biggest, the toughest thing you have is to lead yourself and be able to question and to renew yourself. And from there stems all what actually one needs in order to renew an organization to continue to be effective and to continue to earn our right to win with the customer. So driving a customer experience is about mindset, but also it's about the experience within the organization. So living and having an experienced mindset is something that you cannot dissociate. You can't say you're going to have an experienced mindset at home, but you're not going to have it at work, or you're going to have it at work when you do this, when you deal with the customer, but what when you deal with your colleague or another stakeholder. So for us, moving away from a lot of what made us great to what will make us great in the coming 2 decades was about changing the mindset and starting to value less people's ability to do things effectively and very well, and value much more people's ability to drive the right mindset in order to morph our offering into an experiential world where experience is much more valued as opposed to goods and services. So in our cinema business, in box cinema, we don't sell a ticket. So when you are there serving customers, you're not supposed to be selling a ticket. You're supposed to be actually selling a night out. It's a whole different mindset. And some people get it, some people don't get it. The ones that don't get it, we feel that we have a big responsibility to support them in their leadership journey. It's about unfreezing, giving them the opportunity to look at this new reality that we're going into. And most of us, when there is a big change coming forward in a world that is so disrupted at every level, we have these tectonic shifts pre-COVID that we're moving from goods and services to experience, moving from the impact of technology and digital. All of that was happening at the same time and at a faster and faster pace. And then we had now, of course, the pandemic. So these shifts coming, most people were alienated by that. And they were wondering, is it about me becoming irrelevant? Is it about me not being able to actually contribute to the organization? And what we try to do is to support them and help them in developing an understanding that actually leads to a shift in mindset, that your value is not about what you know or what you can do, but what you can learn and how you can implement it going forward. This is what matters going forward. And and it actually boils down simply when you are a customer facing officer selling a night out rather than selling actually a ticket. It makes a huge difference, but actually it takes a lot for people to be able to embody that to have that mindset, embody that thinking, and become real ambassadors of the brand the way you want to go, because otherwise you'll just continue to be, you might feel that you're doing a lot, but you're not doing much in reality other than losing customers and losing your customers' interest. So this is why we moved very early on at the very beginning of transformation. The first thing we did was very clearly articulating our purpose and our vision, and then moving into defining what is leadership at Majid Futtaim through our leadership model, and then making sure that the vehicle to actually support people, because you can't develop people, you just can't give them the opportunity to develop themselves, to actually do that through our leadership institute. And how can we in reality support them in this leadership development journey? Some do, some get it, some do it, some are able to succeed at it and some not. But then at the end of the day, at the other end of this journey, we have to be waiting for them with new challenges where they actually feel that it was worth it for them. And then 2 years down the line, they'll have to change again. And that's going to be a continuous learning journey, a journey of change that actually should excite most of our people rather than, I would say, putting them off.
And that leadership investment, Alain, must have been tested quite a lot in the pandemic, given that so many of your businesses are retail and malls and movie theaters. How did that leadership investment pay off or not in this pandemic?
So look, I would say, honestly, we're very lucky that we started that early on, and we got, and we're very lucky that, I mean, for us, not that COVID happened at all. I wish it didn't, but actually COVID happened in 2020 and not in 2015. This investment that we have been putting in for the past 5 years have actually, has actually helped us to not to be on the side curve, but actually be able to lead this accelerated pace and lead this transformation in a much more accelerated pace. Be able to really understand that we had 10 days to shift the organization from going this way to actually going to the opposite direction. And that meant that everyone had to be a leader. Everyone had to understand that they had to be self-starters, and they had actually to deal with a situation that they were never trained for, they were never expecting, and they may never see in the future. But it was a matter of, basically, it was a matter of survival, and it was a matter of personal leadership at every single, I would say, every single layer of the organization. And I've been humbled by the reaction of my colleagues across the board and the Majid Futtaim leaders that have done tremendous things in turning around, realizing very, very early on that actually our cost base has to be drastically changed. We have to basically accelerate our digital transformation even further. How do we continue to serve our customers? Realizing that during the pandemic, some of our businesses like grocery, retail, and others are actually a lifeline for people, as important as healthcare, dare I say. You need to, for people to stay at home, they need to be serviced, and they need to be served promptly, and they need to get the product that they need at the right time, and the experience matters. They also need to work. They need to be able to equip themselves for a situation that they were not ready for. They need to work out. They need to, I mean, a lot of our daily lives have so much changed, and people expected us to be there, and we were there. So I am very proud, and I'm very happy that we went through that, and we're ready for the next one, I would say.
Yeah, great. Well, your story a little bit is evocative of one of the comments from a participant in the chat, that great leaders don't just inspire followers, they create more leaders.
Yeah.
Let me come back to this later and introduce Amy Edmondson, who's a wonderful professor at Harvard, and we're going to start with Amy, and she has sort of invented this notion of psychological safety, which in hindsight seems rather obvious. And in fact, Google's Project Aristotle, their research project on effective teams, said that psychological safety was the #1 predictor of effective teams. But Amy stumbled on this, a little bit by surprise, and I'll ask her to talk about why she was surprised. And you'll see this is a photo of a old Model T Ford assembly line factory, and I'll ask her to explain why I might be showing this picture, but also how she stumbled on the idea of psychological safety, and in particular the implications for leaders. So Amy, can you talk a little bit about how you discovered the notion of psychological safety and what it means for leaders in this current new world?
Rookie error. Thank you, Aaron. I'm so glad you changed the question. The first question was, or the first statement you said was that I invented psychological safety. I did not. I discovered it, or rediscovered it, as the case may be. And you showed the photo of the assembly line, the Model T assembly line, because I suspect that far too many leaders today still have a mental model that is well designed for that reality, for that world, right? And let me be clear. It was okay, at least in terms of the profitability and the products, for Henry Ford's employees to be afraid at work. In fact, they were largely terrified of the boss. You could get fired for smiling, it turns out, in a Ford plant in 1900. And so that works, right? I got to admit it, that works incredibly well. Fear-based management works when the work is individual, the tasks are individual, the tasks are standardized, there is a right way to do it, and the results of those tasks are objectively observable, right? When all three of those conditions are met, go ahead, use fear as a tool. I think very, very few of you out there have work that is characterized that way. And I see Stephen nodding because, in fact, nothing is further from that world than life sciences work. So nowadays, nowadays that mindset just doesn't work. And yet far too many employees are still in a context where they are afraid, not in a position perhaps of outright terror, but with a kind of subtle reluctance to bring their ideas forward. And so I did indeed stumble into psychological safety quite by accident. And the short story of the long story is that I was part of a larger team of physicians and nurses who were part of the early group in the early 1990s studying adverse drug events. So it's really a study of medical error. And my small part in the study was meant to show that better teamwork led to fewer errors, right? It makes sense, just as in aviation. Unfortunately, the data on error rates, painstakingly collected by trained medical investigators over 6 months, following, my month 1 survey of team properties, suggested the exact opposite. The data suggested that the better teams, according to my survey, had higher, not lower, error rates. Now, that was a shock at first, and then suddenly, blinding flash of the obvious, it occurred to me that maybe the better teams don't make more mistakes. Maybe they're more able and willing to talk about them. And indeed, when you reflect back on healthcare delivery as a task, it violates all three. It is, it's not at all individual. It's highly team-based. There's lots and lots of handoffs, lots and lots of different roles and experts who must coordinate thoughtfully for patients to get good care. It's very little of it is standardized. There's some standardization, but there's an awful lot of customization. Every patient is different. Every condition is different. And finally, the results, at least in the short term, are rarely objectively observable. And so what we really need is people absolutely unafraid to speak up when there's even a shadow of a doubt that it's the right dose or the right person or the right side of the operative field. And so what I found was in the good teams, they were so well aware of that. They were aware of complexity. They were aware of uncertainty. They were aware of what was at stake. And so they talked about it. They were all over it. They didn't let interpersonal risk get in the way of patient risk. And it was only later that I named these very palpable differences in interpersonal climate that I was able to discover psychological safety.
Thank you. And it strikes me hearing you talk and going back to the Model T Ford factory, or even back to Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations and the division of labor in his pin factory, that industrial revolution created enormous wealth. It created enormous productivity when it was focused on those types of tasks. It strikes me as I listen to you describe those tasks are being automated. We don't need people to do that anymore.
You bet.
Almost all the work left for people to do is now intensely human, intensely personal.
Which is why the humanocracy work that Gary was talking about earlier is so very important, right? It's we live in the knowledge era, right? We live in a world in which your employees' ingenuity and collaborativeness and passion, as Alain was talking about, are going to be the source of your effectiveness, not their obedience, their conformity, their sheer effort. It's just a very different world, and yet we have these old mindsets, usually without realizing it, right? They're below conscious awareness. When we think in terms of, well, if something didn't go right, it's because someone just didn't work hard enough and that person should be penalized in some way. We're missing the boat entirely.
You know, you talked about fear. I was reading the other day that before the Industrial Revolution, boredom was not a word in common usage at all. People were not bored. It was the rich upper class sometimes experienced something called ennui, but the masses weren't bored. They might be miserable, their lives might be hard and brutish and short, but it wasn't bored. Boredom came when you had basically came into work every day and did the same task and were on an assembly line. That's where boredom sort of came from. And now we're in a world where we don't need people to be afraid or bored anymore. In fact, we need them to be just the opposite. And maybe I'll take this opportunity to turn to Stephen, who works is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Novartis, and whose entire company is about this very critical knowledge work and innovation and exploration and discovery. And Stephen, you know, you and your company talk about being unbossed, which strikes me as a bit of a radical term on the other end of the spectrum from the fear-based leadership, 100 years ago. And how being unbossed means that we can't afford to be underled. In fact, we need everyone to step up and be a leader. And I thought maybe you could talk not only about what that journey is like at Novartis, but more broadly how every individual needs to go on their own journey, and maybe a little bit about your own journey as well, Stephen.
It's a super fascinating topic, and it's an onion you can keep on peeling. But as the other panelists have already said, we come from a time where things may have been predictable, and now we work in extremely complex situations, and anything that is obvious can be automated, or anything that is even somewhat coming with a pattern, there you can apply machine learning. And suddenly we rediscover the real strength of humans. Even who would have predicted that we would be in a situation that we're in today just a year ago? So suddenly human intelligence is the biggest asset. And so when you take a company, often we think of the brand, but in reality, it's the 44 to 55,000 people that we heard of. For us, it's 110,000 people that try to come up with cures and battle disease. Now we're looking, as was already said, at what the next 10 years will be like, and what it would take for us to keep that pace of innovation and even accelerate it. And we consulted all the research. We were a science-driven company. And what became clear was that a deep sense of purpose matters, that curiosity is everything. And so often companies do a brilliant job at suppressing curiosity. And then the last thing is empowerment. So why do we think that the boss has all the answers? Why do we have teams in support of the leader to feed them with beautiful slides so he or she can look good when they go to the next level? So we really wanted to flip that pyramid and came up with Unboss. Now, the interesting thing was we had a nice proof of concept how to do that with one person or with two people, but we needed to find a way to do that for 110,000 people. And what we couldn't initially figure out is when this is all so obvious. I mean, read the literature, read Amy's book, read Tiffani's book. It's brilliant. It's all there. So why is it that we have such a smart group of people and they're not doing it? I mean, what's stopping? So what is stopping behavioral change? And if that happens at an individual level, you start to get an insight why it's not happening at an organizational level. And that brought us to immunity to change. So what will it really take for the leader to be truly self-aware? And I'm not just talking about the external self-awareness of how you come across, but really go deep into yourself, to become an observer of yourself, to learn to question yourself and to rephrase, because many of our leaders live a memory of who they used to be, or try to still fight that memory of who they no longer want to be, but they're not good at really understanding themselves. Once you can do that and really unravel that part, I think you start to have the beginning of all the wonderful work that Amy is so good at in terms of that psychological safety, or whether that's about a customer perspective. Suddenly you take away some of those anxieties, those fears that drive a lot of leaders every day. And so you need to name it before you can confront it.
And Stephen, did you yourself have an experience?
Yes.
Your own personal leadership journey. I as soon as you mentioned immunity to change, I've been through some of those exercises myself. They can be quite profound.
In my case, it was painful because we have the sentence of organizational change is only possible if there's individual change. It's a beautiful cartoon when you ask who believes the company needs to change, and everybody raises their hand, and then who believes that they will change, and everybody looks the other direction. So I was really advocating that there would be only organizational change if there was individual change. I hadn't processed that also applied to me. And so I was speaking to a colleague about what we were trying to do at Novartis, and he said, "Wow, you must have the most amazing job." And I said, "Yes, but it didn't feel like yes." Somewhere I was feeling uncomfortable. I was then starting to think, why am I not as excited as everybody else is excited? And I went on a very long dog walk with my dog Milo on a very rainy day to start to question myself of what's really going on. And I had to come to the conclusion that I was actually scared, that I had committed publicly to a culture change. To my CEO, I had committed that. To all of our associates, I had committed to do that. And I had no clue how to do it. And it was so tempting to run away from it, to say, maybe this is time to hand over to somebody else. I really had to first understand what I was really afraid of, what my relation with fear of failure was all about, and where that was coming from, to completely rethink myself and how I would show up. And for a long time, I thought that showing up confident and strong would inspire others. It's only when I started to think about what it would look like to show up more vulnerable, that vulnerability doesn't equal weakness. That vulnerability creates followership. That vulnerability invites others to have a conversation about their concerns and their fears. And it's a job that I'm still working on every day. I think leaders are work in progress every day, and I'm definitely work in progress. I can tell you that much.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you to all the panelists for those wonderful introductions. And I thought it was great to just get into the different viewpoints and experiences. And now we're going to start mixing it up a little bit. And the way we want to do that is actually to invite all the participants to reflect on a question and share something back via Poll Everywhere. And we're going to put that in the chat. But let me ask you the question. You can just reflect on it first. So think about the effective manager of the past, someone who manages successfully in the organization of yesterday, of last century. And contrast that with the new leadership that we're reimagining for the future. They're both successful, but one in an old organization that maybe is a bit more mechanistic, a bit more mass standardization of work. And contrast that, this new leader that we're talking about, the journeys that Stephen, Alain, Tiffani, Amy have talked about, the humanocracy that Gary talked about. In one sentence, how would you describe that shift or that difference? What's different about the new leader we need for the future compared to the effective manager of the past? And if you wouldn't mind, go to Poll Everywhere and share your one sentence summary of what that change or that difference is. Can we share the poll again? The link in chat. There it is. If you can go there.
It looks like we're preaching to the converted.
We have a receptive audience for sure.
Cool.
We're going to give participants a couple of minutes to just think about this and type your answer in.
There is one person who's saying that he or she can't access the poll. Is it only in one case, or do more people have the problem? Same here. No, I can't either.
Interesting.
All right, just if you can access the poll everywhere, please do it. And if not, just enter into chat. Yeah, here's the code again. For some folks, it could be a firewall issue.
You were asked to display the QR code again. Maybe you can do that. So here is the QR code now. Maybe this one is working for you better. If it's not the case, just post your answer in the chat, please.
Yeah, you can use a QR code and sometimes get access to it by phone as well. Your phone can sometimes get to it even if your laptop can't. So give it a try. But hopefully most of you can get to it. If not, we'll try to capture what comes in through chat as well. But these are great. Keep them coming. As these are posting on the screen, I'm now going to invite all of my panelists to share their perspective. Either what would your one sentence answer be, or you can react to some of what you're seeing up here. Maybe pick your favorite, or just share what resonates with you as you read these.
So I said in the past it was leaders were comfortable with the status quo. I say today real leadership is being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, great.
I think in the past, leaders brought their brain to work. Now they need to bring their full self to work.
Love that.
You know, it's very interesting. I mean, most of the answers are around the same theme. It was about doing, and now it's about basically leading. And I think the past was more execution oriented. Today is much more relationship oriented. And how can you actually lead through others than lead by doing? So the human element is obviously that. And I think it's an interesting question when we think about the future of work. You know, it goes back to empathy, you know, our ability to, our cognitive capabilities and so on.
It's also interesting how deeply rooted some of the mindsets are about the past. In most of the organizations I work in, I see the sort of a constant expectation and priming of predictability. We don't want surprise. We give you a budget, and if you go over budget, you're punished. And if you go under budget, we might take your money away next year. So people try to get their budget to the penny, which in today's world seems kind of crazy that you would be able to predict a year ahead exactly how much money you would need to spend on, say, travel or various, and yet there's sort of an expectation that you'll hit your numbers to the penny.
Predictability is so at the heart of it. I mean, this false idea that we can have it, and that we base our performance management systems on it, right? And it stems from that assumption that it's just pure effort. If you do your effort, you'll hit that number. You'll hit that exact goal. My answer to your question was from strong, firm, confident to vulnerable, curious, compassionate, which I think is utterly consistent with what others have said. But if you had to, I was thinking about this, and as if you want one sentence for the leaders we need today, I think it's leaders who have the curiosity of a great scientist and the open mind that comes with that, open about especially interpersonal phenomena as well as business phenomena and task and substantive phenomena. But one of the folks in the texted in the chat added that we keep talking about leader, and really I think we should shift to talking about leadership, which is something, and of course that's what Alain was talking about, that is practiced by everybody, and it's the act of influencing others in a positive way. And I do think the successful leaders today and into the future will be those who share power explicitly. So they're vulnerable, they're curious, and they're willing to share power because that's the only way actually to create value.
That's super interesting because, I mean, Aaron, Amy, you have referenced predictability, and then we say the future is more about vulnerability. The thing here that's behind it is control and letting go of control, and how uncomfortable it is, because predictability gives you a safety as a leader that things will go the way you hope they will go. And now, both with letting go of predictability or with vulnerability, you're being asked to let go of control, and the effect that has on somebody, because it requires you to lean in and to dive into the water. And what does that do to a person?
And it was the illusion. Sorry. It was the illusion of control anyway. It wasn't really control. I'll stop.
Yeah, so I would also say, something that Aaron said, and then Stephen and Amy as well, is I feel like part of this is, do we need to reimagine the metrics? Like you mentioned, Aaron, sort of the budget. That's sort of, well, you went over budget, that's a metric. You went under budget, that's a metric. You get rewarded or you get penalized. And so, how do we start to do a metric around new kinds of leadership, right? More with the heart, that it isn't metric and productivity driven, that it is more value. And so how do you capture that? I think, we just did some research literally last week, 20,000 people around the globe about what's important to them from a work perspective. And it's all this personal side of things, right? Health and safety. I want to be reskilled. I'm inspired. I want to keep working, but how do I actually get myself trained and ready? And then what's going to be valuable in the future versus today? And so I feel like metrics drives behavior for both leaders as well, right? Publicly traded company leadership is very different than those that are private because they're held to other standards. And so I feel like if people want to lead with the heart and have people show up with their true selves and do what is inspiring, then we have to find new ways to measure them in order to manage them.
I think that's spot on, Tiffani, and I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat about power and control, and it's so deeply rooted. Many of us still think of leader, manager, boss, supervisor almost interchangeably as related to positions of formal authority and control. And it's so deeply rooted that I started doing an experiment. I started this about a year ago. I would go to a company, and when we were talking about the organization, I would say, hey, can you show me the various ways that you depict the structure of your organization? And they all come back with one thing. You can imagine what they come back with. Yes, the lines and boxes, what I call the hierarchy of bosses. is who is the boss of whom? And the boss has control, and the boss is the manager and the supervisor and the leader and the one expected to demonstrate leadership. And then I say, what else do you have? What other org charts or depictions, graphical depictions of structure do you have? And so far, in every case but one, they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, structure is just a relationship of parts in a system. There's lots of ways you could structure something. And they said, what do you mean? Like they couldn't get their head around that there's a different, I said, well, you could have a diagram of which of your people are working with which other people on which projects, as an example. That could be a structure that wouldn't look anything like it wouldn't even show who's the boss. It would just show what work is being done on which teams by which people and how do they spend their time. You could show a social network analysis of who communicates with whom. That has a structure to it. But this gets at this notion of how deeply rooted it is. And Amy, I thought maybe you would share some of the research on the new research that hasn't been published yet, but on some of the what really drives psychological safety is actually not from the boss of the team, but from the peers.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's we've collaboratively done some research on this, and it's those behaviors in the team. So, and I guess I would refer back to the notion of leadership by everyone. I mean, when people show even these small acts of leadership, like an act of a genuine question to others, and the respect to listen intently to the response, that contributes profoundly to creating psychological safety. It also is a small act of leadership. And so, yes, it's the behaviors that are happening in the interpersonal relationships through which the actual work gets done. You know, if anything should be the boss, it's the work, right? What does the work need from us? You know, what do we need to do to deliver excellence in our strategy, our purpose, our value proposition, and doing that requires us all to be a little bit humble and sometimes leading and sometimes following, but profoundly guided by what the work needs from us. And so structure is really structuring, right? It's a constantly shifting way of working, what I think of as teaming rather than teams.
Alain, how would you summarize the difference between the effective manager of the past and the reimagined leader of the future?
You know, I was thinking while listening to everyone and reading some of the comments to actually what happened since March this year with COVID. And the new dimension that we all suddenly rediscovered, I mean, or reappreciated, okay, was resilience over efficiency and effectiveness. So when you take that and you think about it in the context of leadership and in the context of basically the leader of today or tomorrow, you realize that actually everything matters. Because your comment about the budget and about, you know, how much money are you going to budget for next year's travel or whatever, etc. But in reality, you don't know what context you're going to be working in, and how do you make sure that what you have continues to exist. All the great effectiveness, efficiency that you will simply continue to exist or cease to exist. Okay, and if something happened, let's take just the context of a pandemic that you just saw, but maybe the next one is going to be something very different, but still something that is basically that you can't really control. So what you are outside of the effectiveness or efficiency that you project in times that are equal to the ones that you currently know. So we know that the future is not going to be looking like the way it looks today. Hopefully it will, maybe, I don't know. But the reality is the leader of tomorrow has to be someone that actually has the ability to operate under any environment. And in order to operate under any environment, that takes you back to the very simple realities about human relationships. And you have to just let go of structure, hierarchy, you know, who bosses who, and you have to simply move from power to empower. I mean, I see a lot of power. Who has power? No one has power in reality. It's about empowering people. It's about making things happen in very different contexts. And I think all of these things, going back to your question about budget, that's all driven by efficiency, effectiveness. The old school of thinking, how can we drive, because of the first industrial revolution, because of systems, more effectiveness in everything we do, drive margin, go back to obey to market dynamics, create shareholder value. But in a stakeholder, moving from shareholder value to stakeholder capitalism, you're simply in a very different reality. And leading in this reality is going to be much simpler. Believe me, much simpler. It's much simpler to learn to be nice with people and to be able to actually have meaningful conversations than learn how you put the screw in something in the span of half a second. Okay, and you can do it 30,000 times a day. So efficiency, effectiveness is much stronger to do because we are naturally geared as human beings towards that. We just have to go back to I always go back to that about leading ourselves. The biggest challenge of leadership is leading yourself. It's not leading others. It's not leading chained. It's leading yourself. We are the most daunting task. And I always give this very simple example of actually going on a diet. And people struggle with leading themselves by actually being responsible in their diet for the span of 50 years. I've been trying to do that for the past 30 years. So the biggest issue is about leading yourself and being able to go to the simple, basic truth, the universal truth of human relationships. And in the workplace, because the workplace is suddenly, when people step into the workplace, they're different people. Of course, culture, value, all of the other things that influence that. But in reality, to tomorrow's leader, today's leader is someone that simply has to be a human being and not be a tool.
Yes. And to value the management and the leadership and the empowerment and the creativity that everyone brings at every level. So it goes a little bit back to Stephen, the notion you talked about unbossed. And so many of the words in here, at least, are resonating for me. Being a visionary, being a catalyst for learning, being a curator of experiences, letting go of control, and helping give power to the system. I'm gonna ask our next question. I'll first answer. One of the questions was about whether we were going to save these and share them. Yes, we will share what is all coming in through the polls. We'll package them up. We'll make them available afterward to participants. And we'll try to save as much as we can that's coming in through the chat as well for those who can't get to the poll. We are going to have another poll in just a minute, but I'm also going to give folks a few minutes to stand up and stretch. Sometimes we spend all day on Zoom, and this session, I'd like to give people a moment to take a break and get a glass of water and stretch. But let me first ask the next question so that you can be thinking about it, and we'll then come back in just a few minutes. The question is about how if we take all these themes that we've just been kicking around and discussing together, how can we individually and collectively, and even as organizations and society, help leaders and make sure they're prepared for the future? It feels in many ways like the future is now, but how can we better prepare our leaders and help each of us, all of us, apply these new skills and mindsets and behaviors? That's the question. We will open up another poll, but we're gonna actually, while people are entering into the poll, we're gonna take a little break. So I would invite everyone to take a short stretch break, reflect on this question during the break, and if you'd like to turn your screen off for a moment and turn it back on in a few minutes, that would be great. I'm actually going to give us a 5-minute break, but the 5-minute break includes entering your answer into the poll everywhere. Okay, so that's between the poll everywhere and the break. You may only have a few minutes for a break, but I'm going to turn my video off now for just a few minutes, and we will resume promptly at the top of the hour.
Oh, okay.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, hello. We are just taking.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to have an answer from this lady with this pink
Yeah, it's
dress.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you, and I'm sending you message through. Did you get it?
No. Where did you send it?
Peter Drucker, the name that is under your picture, the video.
Ah, okay, yeah. That's the
So it's
camera.
not you.
You send it to the camera. Can you take, there is a name, Yvonne Pirkner, Yvonne Host.
Okay.
Can
Sorry
you
about
send
that.
it there?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I
I'm
will.
sorry for that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to. Okay, good. Thank you. Yvonne, huh?
Yvonne, yeah. It's Yvonne. Can you find me?
Yvonne Perk.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For folks who are interested, this is, we have an artist who's trying to capture the ideas that have been coming in through the discussion, and we will also share this. This is a live work in progress as we speak, and this will also be something that we can share after this session's over.
That looks very cool.
With 1 minute to go, can we post the poll everywhere link just one more time, so folks who are coming back who haven't shared can answer the question? Maybe you can put the page up again with the question. Okay. So I'm going to also open this question up to our panelists. Alain, maybe I'll start with you, since you've already started on this journey 5 years ago that you discussed with your transformation. What were some of the things that you did that made the biggest difference in preparing leaders?
So I would say being intentional about it, I think is very important. And I think leadership, what's valued in leadership in different organizations differs. And this is why articulating what good looks like at Majid or Futtaim had a big impact, and developing our leadership model and putting ourselves forward in terms of, rather than actually always trying to hold your team members accountable, giving them a tool to hold you accountable is very important. So we kind of turned around that and saying, look, what good looks like is this is how you meet the bar, this is what's expected, this is when you don't meet the bar. And actually, you can hold also your boss accountable, or your peer, or whomever you're working with accountable about that. It's not anymore a top-down exercise. It's both a top-down and a bottom-up exercise. And we're equalizing this, going back to this thing about power, equalizing this balance of power. Actually, by making sure that both parties are actually empowered equally. I think that was very important. The other thing is, how do we? The question was, how do we support our people? How do we change the narrative from basically people are here to do a job and to do it well? And I think someone said, I think it's Amy, about, if you're not doing a good job, you get sanctioned, okay, because it's supposed to be that you haven't done enough. So how do we, in the context of leadership, move away from all the traditional notions and go back and say, we want to support you in the leadership development. You have to choose that. And we are not here to say you've done well or not, but this is an opportunity to actually work on yourself, drive your leadership development in the right way, choose the leader that you want to be. There is no right or wrong, okay? And that opens career development opportunities and career progression opportunities. And how can you contribute more meaningfully to your team, to the organization? How do we move, and that's something we did, move from job descriptions to roles? So just ban job descriptions, because job descriptions is also a bit of the past. Actually, what is the role that I play in a team? What's my role in the team? It's not much my job, because the job is going to be done sooner or later by machines. But the role that you play as humans is what actually we will always have to do, be able to do, and allow us to contribute much more meaningfully. A lot of the tasks are actually a waste of everyone's time, because where we can actually put much more value is where we can influence. And that's the role that you play in a team. And this is not what you are assigned as a task, it's the role that you play in a team. So that concept of role is also something that is extremely important, where people suddenly feel that actually their contribution matters. And their contribution is not just about how do you quantify it. Of course, at the end of the day, we are in business. So we deliver against budget ambitions and so on. But the how we go about it is very important. And being consistent between your purpose, your why, what you're doing and how you go about it. And that's what I call the overall employee experience when you're looking inward to the organization. Is something that, in my opinion, is extremely important and helpful. And when you have all of that, the one thing I felt is that suddenly people started to feel safer, more comfortable in that environment, because you're creating an environment where many people are actually opening up, sharing their experiences, and automatically, I would say, working on themselves. So this is not about new notions that you give to them. It's just this journey to explore and to better understand how we work together better. So these are basically, I would say, that soft part of the organization what we focused on for and we continue to focus on, and we'll have to focus on for the rest of our lives. I mean, this is not a matter that you do, yes, that's it, you're done, move on. This is something like showering every day. You can't say I showered last week.
You're continuing to invest in your leaders and your leadership at every level.
This is a state of, you never get there.
Yeah. Great. Let's share what some of the folks are writing in the poll everywhere. Can we share what people are submitting? And maybe put in the chat again if people haven't submitted and want to. Go ahead and add to the chat the link again in case folks haven't and would like to. Great. And I'll invite the other panelists to chime in here.
So that was for us the big challenge of how do you change an organization of 100,000 plus people and a legacy that is so strong that onboards any new joiner into this old framework almost instantly. And so I think a few things that we've learned so far, whilst it is the task for everybody to do the work, self-reflect, change their behaviors, the leader needs to set the example by showing up vulnerable, by sharing their own experiences. And in the beginning, that is very uncomfortable. But if the leaders and the leadership team don't model this, others will not think they have the permission to do so. The second thing is, for us, there is such a thing as there is the will and there is the skill. So it starts with the will. This is not an invitation that comes without obligation. We actually, after a period of time, made quite a few leadership changes when it was obvious that some of our leaders didn't have the will to move in this direction. But then once the will is there, we also felt the need to help them build the skills. So you need to create an ecosystem in which you can support your people to change, because they have learned to lead in a certain way, have been incentivized to lead in a certain way for so long. And in the beginning, it's hugely uncomfortable and intimidating. So we created an entire ecosystem to support them, to coach them, to create, to build the skills around it. And it's a tremendous commitment to do that at scale.
Great. Amy or Tiffani, do you want to chime in on this one?
Go ahead, Amy. I'll follow.
Okay, I'm happy to. It's again, I'm sort of curious about what Tiffani will say, because that's what they've been doing. I got a chance to help a little bit, but the to me, what Stephen describes and a little bit of what I've glimpsed at Salesforce and in other places is a powerful combination of breakthrough and follow through. And breakthrough to me is about giving people the opportunity to experience something that's emotionally engaging, requires them to be vulnerable, as Stephen put it. And there's a kind of either mini or not so mini wake up call experience where they might be in a simulation where they discover that they didn't perform as well as they thought because they weren't really listening to others in the exercise or something, but something that lets them have a powerful experience of the old way not really working. So there's an emotional commitment and desire to change. And then the follow through is really that infrastructure, that creating that ecosystem that Stephen mentioned, where people will get support and get coaching and get sort of ongoing help shifting, but in the context, I believe, of doing the real work. And so you don't want all of this activity to be sort of outside, off-site, offline, but maybe initially some of that is really important, but then it's really got to be helping people do things a new way, real time, in action.
Yeah, so I guess I'll follow Amy. So thanks for giving Salesforce a shout out. But I would say ultimately it's this kind of crisis of prioritization. That how do you navigate all these things? The priority of recovering from what's going on from a growth perspective, taking care of your people, becoming a more empathetic leader, taking care of your customers. Like, that's a lot for everybody. To use Alain's, example of eating better. Change is hard. 30 years, 40 years, still thinking about how do I eat better? It's the, or January 1st, it's you got great goals. And then January 10th, it's over. So, I think the biggest challenge is getting everybody rowing in the same direction, especially when it comes to change. And culture is one of those things that just doesn't happen overnight. And so that rapid iteration and trying and failing has to be part of that culture. You just, somebody said in the comment, and I couldn't agree more, this kind of living organism that's constantly adapting to what's happening versus it being this very static way of doing things. And the example that I gave, at the beginning of this, where we went and had 1 million conversations, we didn't know what we were going to have out of it, but being able to then respond and act like a startup that's 21 years old with 55,000 employees was, not easy. It was uncomfortable and painful for many, but I think the culture is such that there's so much trust in what's going on that it is for the purpose that we have, which is, the success of our customers, and being better stewards of, the planet and the things that we do. But, that's what I'd say, that for me, when I meet with leaders around the world and talk to clients and customers, startups, et cetera, is I hear this crisis of prioritization. I don't know what to do first or second. I don't know the implications. I don't understand the unintended consequence of this decision over here to this part of the business. And I think it takes time that not all leaders have or are willing to make. But culture is what's unique to every brand out there, and no one can replicate that. That's your competitive sauce, your ability to be responsive and do all the things we're saying. So I feel like that is something that cannot be ignored at this time, because we have an opportunity to really reframe what that looks like from a grassroots, from the bottom up.
I also think that many organizations that have been still perhaps unintentionally modeling themselves after a machine and have been perhaps overbossed, with these matrix structures where many individuals feel like they have multiple bosses who are telling them what to do and using carrots and sticks to control their behavior, can create, I guess, exacerbate this crisis of prioritization. It's like, now I've got even more people giving me, overloading my plate with tactical actions that in many cases feel disconnected from a larger purpose.
I'll just say one more thing. Like, I love when I meet with leaders and they go like this: our priorities are ... and ... I go, great. What's the first priority? No. ... No. I go, what? I went to a state school, don't have my MBA, but I'm going to guess there's only one number one. So if you could just pick one, that
They're
can
all
help.
tied for number one. Yeah, that's great. Okay, now, enough of my amateur questions. It's time for the real questions, which is coming from the audience. So we're going to invite you now to ask questions. And we'll take this poll everywhere down. We're going to save all the responses, don't worry, but we'll take this one down, and we're going to do one more poll everywhere. But this poll everywhere isn't your answer to our question. This poll everywhere is your suggestion for what question now we should ask the panelists. So we have a new poll everywhere. And again, just click on the link. Maybe we can put up a slide with the link so people can see it. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. But don't answer that question now. Now we want you to ask questions. So what you should be typing in the poll everywhere is a question that you would like to ask the panelists and the other participants who can respond via chat.
Aaron, as these are coming in, I saw very quickly in the chat, I saw someone saying that I didn't get to read the whole thing, but that COVID-19 is a test. And it suddenly occurred to me, if this is a test of sort of how the new leadership and the new organizational forms are working, we've flunked that test largely. And it just struck me as a pretty interesting idea, the sort of diagnostic, which says we're just not there yet. I mean, I think we already knew that, but maybe.
Well, I think
organizations.
I wonder if it's more nuanced, though, Amy. I have seen organizations who have seen, even within their own system, multiple ways of responding, some of which have been enormously succful and effective,
That's
and
right.
then others of which have not. But the ones that were effective,
Right.
I think, point to the leadership of the future.
Absolutely. It's like experiments that have worked, thoughtful experiments that have worked.
I also think, Amy, that it has shined a light on the lack of investments that so many companies have made or not made, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a lot of the things we've been talking about, but specifically, I can say that, the amount of digital transformation that's happened in the last 6 months is faster and more accelerated than what we saw in the past 5 or 6 years. And so the question then becomes, if it's shined a light on the lack of leadership or the lack of flexibility or agility or resilience, kind of all the words, what does that then mean? Because I think to the failure, to your point, Amy, that we absolutely, and it's shined a light on all the things we've had to, we need to continue to make investments in, even outside of business, right? The equality and social issues and all the things, other things we're dealing with. And so I think how we respond here is the real test. Do we come out of this better and stronger for it? Or do we just really fight and claw to go back to the way that it was?
It also will come all the way back full circle to that essentially human qualities of people and leaders as the human elements of the pandemic continue to play out. There is likely to see growing grief, mental and emotional distress, anxiety, depression as this drags on, and how we as people and humans and leaders respond to that for ourselves and each other is part of the test. I think we're still being tested.
Maybe the end of the macho leader, maybe the end of the macho, firm, confident, non-vulnerable model.
That's a great point. Yes, vulnerability is so important now. All right, let's show some of the questions that are coming in on Poll Everywhere. And there's a way to vote, to upvote some of the questions so you can see.
There is one question in the chat. It's from Miriam Kurzig. Maybe Miriam, you want to unmute yourself if you hear us. If not, I can.
Well, I was just reacting to the last discussion. In the United States, for sure, our opinions would have been totally different if it wasn't an election year. There's no doubt about that. So I'm just reacting to someone saying that we've been a failure. Oh no, we've been a success. And I'm saying, who is telling us? Those are opinions. That's my question. And my name is actually Miriam Friedman. That's my middle name, Kurzig.
Ah, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so Miriam, I think that might be a little directed. I sort of made a little bit of that comment, so I'll respond back, and anybody else who wants to as well. But here's what I'd say. I'd say that employees and customers are saying brands have failed. So that's where mine is coming from. 20,000 people research, 15,000 people research, both on, do customers feel like brands are stepping up and leading with their values? Do you trust brands? We have a crisis of trust. And then on the future of work, what do you want? I want my employer to invest more in my reskilling. I want the opportunity to do better and more compelling and meaningful work. So I can only say my comment comes from customers and employees saying companies and brands are failing them. And of course, we have some that say they're totally doing great. So it's not just failure, but the majority, it's almost half and half. I mean, if I'm, really swagging the stats. It's almost half and half. So that's how I'd answer that.
The research we've done has shown that employees who feel like their companies have come through and lived their values and shown grit and vulnerability and openness and stuck to their values are actually more engaged and more positive and more energized and more proud to work for those companies than ever. But then there's the other ones that in their views, again, it is opinion and perception, have not lived up to those things, are feeling more kind of alone and disengaged and disillusioned. Let's try to tackle a couple of these questions. How can we get leaders at the top of big organizations to let go of control, and not just literally, but also the mindset of I need to be in charge and control things?
I have two ideas to offer here. First of all, there is something incredibly scary of letting go of control, because people, whether they're leaders at the top or anywhere in the organization, you remain accountable. And so there is a false perception that in order to deliver on your accountabilities, you need to have control. So we first of all need to help anybody who's accountable to see and rediscover the value of the ecosystem that is around them, of who can help you achieve this task and what will they need from you. And so that is always comes back to, is it meaningful? So is there a purpose? What can they learn here? And people are motivated intrinsically by learning new things and feeling that they contribute to something meaningful. So the entire concept that you need to have controls and control in order for people to do things is outdated. Now, the second idea is initially, we had reactions from our Asia business of saying, yeah, that may work. That's probably a Scandinavian concept, but it doesn't work in this part of the world. Now, what I discovered is I was then looking for arguments why it could work in Asia. And to my big surprise, I found a lot of this in ancient scriptures, whether that's in China or whether that's in India. Why I'm making this point is many leaders say, this is scary what you're telling us. This is untested. Let me hold on to what I'm comfortable with. But in reality, the concepts that we're introducing here are not new. They're actually thousands and thousands of years old. It's only some of the modern management concepts that are 50 to 80 years old. But we're going back to ancient wisdom here. And I think that will give many people, in addition to the research, confidence that it's okay to lean in. And then if you create a support network around it, you invite people in rather than making them even more uncomfortable as they put their first steps in that direction.
That's so powerfully put. I know we have a lot of questions, but I'd love to just add on. I think it's what Stephen is describing is trying to help people understand that control was always an illusion anyway. And really the invitation to work together with others to accomplish something really amazing and important for the company, but really for society, is so much more exciting than that old position of believing you had control over something that wasn't really controllable anyway.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We are almost out of time. There's a wonderful question here that I think has the answer within it. Do we still need the one hero, the one heroic leader who solves all the problems, or do we need a team of adults? I think we know the answer to that question. It's a wonderful question because it highlights, how, and I think in times of crisis, sometimes we want the one heroic leader who will just tell us what we want to hear and solve all the problems. That would be lovely. Is that what we need? I think the question answers it. No, we need a team of adults where it's okay to be afraid and uncertain and not have all the answers and figure it out together. And I think, I hope that we've started to figure some of this out together just a little bit. I would just applaud our wonderful panelists for some great insights. Any closing comments from the panelists before we sign off?
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. That was very interesting, and it has been great to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alain.
Agreed. What a treat. I think we have our work cut out for us.
Yes. Yeah, we do. Tiffani, any closing comments?
No, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed the comments that were coming and sort of the opinions. But what's really wonderful to see on a forum like this that's global is everybody is so open now to this different kind of conversation that's much more EQ oriented than IQ oriented. So it was really great to listen in.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffani. Stephen, any final words?
Just gratitude. I learned more than I contributed, so thank you for letting me be part of this, and a big thank you to the audience for their active input and suggestions. And Aaron, fantastic moderation. Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Don't forget, I believe Simon Sinek is on a little bit later tonight, European time. I'm sure that will be wonderful. I want to thank our panelists once again and all of you participants for such lively conversation. We will be making available soon a sort of packaging up of all the great input and this artwork. Thanks to our wonderful artist who was able to capture this live as we had our meeting. How great. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week.
Thank you very much. So it was very interesting, and you're perfect on time. I'm surprised by that. It's the first time that we really have 3 more minutes, but we really need the 3 minutes because we have changes in the links for the Thinkers Corners tonight. So the link for Thinker Corner 8 and 10 will change. Everything will be the same. It's just that the links will change, and I will put it now in the chat. So please make sure first that you have the link, and then I put a PDF, and I advise you to go there over the PDF to enter the sessions. It should be now in the conversation. Can you see it? Has anyone problems or questions on that? So far not. So it's only the links who are changing. And Aaron, yes, you said Simon Sinek is at 7 p.m. The 2 sessions will be changed. So first there will be, where is it? First there will be Amy Bernstein and Claudio Fernandez Arroz, and then will be Simon Sinek at 7 p.m. And to close this session, I would like to get one insight of you, one takeaway from you, one word which describes this session, just to give an applause and virtual applause to our participants here and to the plenary. Thank you very much.